welcome officially. I'm outside today. Let me know. And Nathan, you can maybe stay on top of it if for any reason it's cutting out because I'm on my back porch. I really wanted to be close to the sun, but if it starts cutting out, I'll move inside for us. So all of you know this, and I think Chris might know or might not know, but our new Chris that's with us. But Imaginarium exists as to be a space to imagine a better world and then intentionally make it so. And our chief beliefs here, everything that we center our work around is the idea of the inherent worth and magic of every living thing, including all of humanity, our inherent responsibility that we share to ourselves and to the rest of the world, and our inherent connection that we have to each other and to the rest of the natural world around us. So that is why we gather ultimately to figure out how we can continue to tap into our own personal worth and magic, our connections and our responsibilities. And we have practices that we do every time that we're together. We call them our spiritual practices because we believe all of life is spiritual. And these are ways to just simply center us and ground us and keep us connected. So the first practice that we do is what we call our naming practice. And it's an opportunity for a couple of things. One, to introduce ourselves, not only to each other as still we continue to have new people come in and out and we want to get to know each other more, but also to sort of step into your space in this next hour and a half. And in doing so and in practicing like this every time we're together, we hope that you are challenged then to take up your space every day. Wherever you're at in the world. And also for you to be aware, especially for those of us that are white and understanding our own privilege, that often we take up too much space. And so to become really aware of how much you are talking, how much you are inserting yourself, if you need to speak up more, if you need to learn to use your voice, or if you need to learn to be quiet and listen more. This practice is ultimately challenging us to do just that. So I'll ask us over Zoom. It's easy if I can just call you out. We want you to share your name, your preferred pronouns, and where you're calling in from. So Nathan, will you start us off, please?
Sure. Nathan Johns, he, him, his, and I'm calling from Lebanon, Tennessee.
Lovely. Sarah?
I'm Sarah Emick, and I, she, her, hers, calling from Nashville, Tennessee.
Thank you. Alana?
I am Alana from Houston, Texas, and my pronouns are they, them.
Thank you, Alana. Hausers?
Chris, he, him, his. We're from Brentwood.
Linda, I don't have a preference.
Thank you. Malia?
Malia Carden, she, her, hers, from Brentwood,
Thank you, Malia.
Tennessee.
Thank you, Malia. Monica?
Monica Mayday, Spring Hill, Tennessee, she, her.
Thank you, Monica. Cindy?
Sorry, my computer is messed up and I'm on my husband's cheap one, so I'm not sure how to work it. Cindy Hoppus, Spring Hill, Tennessee, she, her.
Thanks, Mom. Ashley?
Ashley John, she, her, hers, Lebanon, Tennessee.
Lovely. Leah?
Hi, I'm Leah. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in East Nashville.
Thanks, Leah. And Chris? Chris might not be at a place where they can participate. So Chris, if you can unmute and want to join us, please just unmute and do so. Otherwise, we will move on to the next practice, which Leah is going to lead us through. Oh, wait, I'm Melissa. Sorry, she, her, hers, Franklin, Tennessee. And Saint, back here.
Okay, so our next practice is called Tell Me Something Good. And as many of you may know, it has a little theme song. So I want everybody to unmute if you feel comfortable, so we can all together sing the little theme song. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tell me something
good.
Yay, fun chaos. All right, so this practice is just a time where we focus and name the positive, because that is not something that always comes natural to us. And so we dedicate a time of every meeting to talk about good things that are happening in our lives or lives of ones around us. So unmute yourself or raise your hand or whatever and share what's going on.
I have a job interview tomorrow.
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay. Good luck.
Thanks.
For,
Can you say more about it?
Yeah, it's a position at my company. I've been expecting it to open for a while, and it came open a couple weeks ago, and it's a project coordinator position. So it's kind of like a little baby project manager, because you got to be a baby before you can get bigger.
That's amazing. Well, I'll piggyback on that. I also have a job interview. I'm applying for it'd be a big step for me out of the classroom into what they call a regional achievement manager. So I'd be coaching teachers. I'd be in charge of professional development and curriculum for our Nashville region, which is a really big task and something I'm really motivated to do. And I found out on Friday that I made it to the final round on Tuesday. So Tuesday afternoon, I'll be presenting my vision for the role and the impact that I hope to make. And so I'm really excited. I'm nervous, but it's a good nervous. I feel like I'm going to crush it and it's going to be great. So, but I'm excited to share that with y'all.
Awesome.
is that within your same network or a different?
Yep, it's the same network. So. Mhm.
I have two. First, I mentioned this to several people on the happy hour calls, but a couple weeks ago I learned that I was getting a promotion at work, which is amazing because I've been working towards this for a long time, and I'm super excited about it. So yay. And the second one was this last week, I was able to take some time away from everyone, which was amazing. And I did a bunch of hiking around the waterfalls in sort of southern and a little bit east Tennessee, which was really cool. So
I'm thankful for vaccinations to get life back to somewhat normal, or whatever we call that these days, because I am so sick of being disconnected from everybody. And I just want to get out and party constantly. So I really am. I miss everybody. A year of this is just enough. So let's get back to a living life.
I have one. I haven't shared the hard part because it was hard to share, but back about 6 or 7 months ago, Rick was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And we found out that it was basically hereditary. His 95-year-old dad. So there was a couple of places that were high grade, which would be the ones that would spread, but luckily it was caught early. So he went through 6 treatments of BCG, which is basically putting this live bacteria into the bladder. And then the doctor about 2 weeks ago went back in and looked, and the bladder was completely clear and the high grade areas were benign. So based on the fact that it can reoccur, he's going to have treatments every 6 months for 3 years. But this was excellent news this early and with just one set of treatments. So.
I have a job interview this week. I'm kidding. I'll never do anything but what I do every week, week in and week out for the last 34 years. So that's a joke.
I may give him a performance review though, whether he likes it or not.
I have a friend who is dying. He's 55 years old with liver cancer. And he doesn't have long. He's ineligible for a transplant. Thank you. And every day I'm like on my phone waiting for a word from his wife or his brother. And I've gone and gotten some, he was in radio in the late 80s and early 90s. And I've gone and gotten some videos from artists that he played and supported back in the day. And I got an audio from a guy named Mylon Lefevre, and probably most of you don't know that name, but he was a absolute superstar in the 80s in the Christian music world. And he's had a very interesting life. He's 77. And I hung on, after Keith Green died in 1982, I hung on every word Mylon Lefevre said through the 80s. And he did an audio, like a 5-minute audio thing for my friend. And I've listened to it so many times. And it's so my old life, what he's talking about. You know, he's very Southern. Well, Kevin, you're going to go to heaven. You've been saved from hell, brother. And it is just so adorable to me. I know that it's a toxic belief system that I don't ascribe to any longer, but it's a part of who I was at one time. And just to hear this guy's voice again after 30 years of not hearing his voice has been very powerful for me, to just remember the good parts of what his career meant for me in the 80s, and then just to be touched by his kindness towards my friend. So there's a bunch there, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, Lana.
Yes, I have 2 things. The first is I on April 10th I will be working with someone in this Zoom meeting with performance and vocal training, which I'm really excited about because I love being an entertainer. I love hosting. I love doing those kind of things, and I love talk spaces and talking about things that matter. And I want to use all of my skills to do that. And so it's a little scary because you're putting yourself out there and you're preparing yourself for pass or fail. But I definitely think that it's heading in the right direction. And actually, like I'm shaking it now, but actually, just the other day I sang for my life coach my first non-religious song ever that I've ever performed in front of anybody. And it was the song Warrior from David Lovato. And I thought that was such an extraordinary song to begin with because it talks about putting in my life. And so, yeah, those are the 2 great things that are happening. So I'm very excited.
Anybody else? All right, Melissa, before we move on, do we want to do naming for the people who arrived?
Great call. Abby, you snuck in here. You want to introduce yourself and tell us your pronouns and where you're at?
Do I want to or will I? Abby Lane in East Nashville, she, her, hers.
Lovely. I'm so thankful you agreed to do that, Abs. Hey, Chris, we can see you now. Would you like to introduce?
Yay.
Where are you calling in from, Chris?
Well, the Chattanooga area, Ringgold, Georgia.
Perfect.
Yep.
So glad to have you. And
Thanks.
Randy snuck in here, even though dealing with home.
Randy Oxley, I'm in Antioch, a very wet Antioch today, but I'm here.
Glad you're here and that everybody's safe. All right, gonna pass it over to Nathan then.
Yeah, thank you. So each time we gather formally, we try to include some acknowledgements about some of our that are a part of our spiritual practices. And these acknowledgements really help to serve to help us sort of step out of our typical day-to-day lives and they're invitations to see the larger world around us. So as we set aside some time to offer these acknowledgements, let's recognize that this is merely the beginning of our collective work and not the end. And so the first one we'll offer is the anti-racism acknowledgement. We as a community recognize that white supremacy and systemic racism are an insidious part of our society. Intentional or not, we recognize the harmful impact of its presence in our lives and the impact it has on Black, Indigenous, and people of color members of this community and other communities around us. We commit ourselves to an active practice of anti-racism. We commit it to rooting out and addressing racism whenever and wherever we find it, starting within each of us and extending into our communities and the greater world around us. So I will turn it over to Sarah, who is going to lead our land acknowledgement.
Yes, thanks. The next acknowledgement that we like to do is a land acknowledgement, where we acknowledge the erasure of the indigenous peoples of the land and also acknowledge the people who once inhabited this land, acknowledging as sacred and how it matters who first inhabited it. And that, if you're in Nashville, was the Shawnee and Cherokee people. And we know that by acknowledging it is a way to begin to heal ourselves and honor those who deserved to be honored, and ultimately imagining a better world and making it so. And then with all this rain, to be thinking about what does that rain symbolize in your life, you know, and also the sunshine, just the movement of creation and those symbols, and what do they mean to you, and be curious about that and the shifts that may have come up, or what feelings have come up throughout these last couple of days with this extreme weather. Send it to Chris.
Thanks, Sarah. Let's all take a moment. Let's do this. We're going to do a practice to just get present inside of ourselves. If you could put your two hands together, and we're going to say a little something here shortly, but if you can close your eyes to take out distractions, if it's easy to put both feet on the floor, let's all take a deep breath in. Let it out. If you're anything like me, you might have voices that tell you you're not enough, tell you you aren't good enough, smart enough, thin enough, whatever. And this practice is to help us slow down and speak to ourselves about our worthiness. So we will tap from the thumb to the pinky, slowly, one at a time, and we'll say, stop, breathe, know your worth. As that sinks in, let's do it again. Stop, breathe, know your worth. One more time. Thank you. Stop, breathe, know your worth. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Leah, for continuing to lead us in our practices. Y'all, it's so good to just be present with you this afternoon. As Monica was talking about getting the vaccine and just getting back to whatever our new normal patterns will be, I get my second vaccine on Wednesday, and as excited as I am, a little bit nervous as I've heard the second Moderna vaccine, it can be hard. So I'm happy to deal with the challenge, though, to make myself and others safer. But it even made me think, like, I can't wait. I mean, someday soon, and I mean soon as in this year, we'll actually get together in person for those of us at least in the Nashville area. And we'll look forward to figuring out how we continue to be online together for those of you that are joining us from other spaces. But it's just exciting to think that we might have the possibility soon to actually be face to face. But in the meantime, I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful for Zoom and how it's continued to help us facilitate community over these past very hard 14 months, 15 months, whatever it's been now. I, on Monday, posted, if any of you happen to follow along on my social media, but I did a podcast with someone from my cohort that I graduated with. Actually, they're graduating this May, and I'm super excited for them. But in the midst of that interview, she is also, and I'm trying to think of what she formally calls it, but she does what she calls angel readings, which I've never had or known anyone else to do angel readings. She did it with me twice while we were face to face in school. And it's basically, she uses what looks like to me like tarot cards. And she believes that she is tapping in to some divine beings, right, that are with us constantly in the world and finding ways to encourage us. Anyways, I was deeply moved by it. And then the 3 times she's done it, I've been deeply moved. And then she went on to interview me. And every time I do a podcast, it's so interesting because I'm having to constantly think about and process all the ways that I've changed and all the ways that hopefully I've grown, and I celebrate the growth moments, but just change in general. And as I was listening back, which I recorded this podcast back in, I think it was December or late fall, and just thinking, she was asking questions and what was on tape and what she even cut out because we talked for almost 2 hours. But she really was pressing me and reminding me about my role also as a theologian. And I was having discussions with Ben this week about that, and Doug Day, and just really trying to grapple with how does Melissa, who considers herself right post-Christian and post-theist, my idea of God has just drastically changed, but also how does Melissa continue to wear one of the mantles, right, of being a theologian. And I've just decided that if I'm any kind of theologian, it would be an everyday theologian with a lowercase t, not a lowercase t to diminish whatever the divine is, but just in the sense of, I am not interested, and many of you have heard me say this before, I'm not interested or spending a ton of time trying to name or define who or what God or the divine is. I am, however, very interested in what moves us. I'm very interested in the things that cause us to stand back in awe and in wonder. I'm very interested in the things that cause us to want to be better. And whatever that is, I believe that's the divine. I believe, and I said in the podcast, whatever becomes invitational, and I love that, Nathan, the way that you set up our acknowledgements, that they are just by way of inviting us into living into these things. So whatever is invitational in this world, whatever beliefs you and I hold, whatever actions you and I do that invite others into this with us, I believe that is whatever the divine is. And so ultimately, I think the divine wants us to be better humans and for us to continue to create a better world. And that to me speaks to growth. It speaks to growth personally, and it speaks to growth that is so needed and necessary in the world around us. And so the idea even of better, right, it indicates change. It indicates movement. It indicates a mindset and a worldview that relies on and trusts that there will always be opportunities for growth. And so today's talk, before we discuss together and end with our final toast, is a little bit of theology. It is a little bit of psychology, a little bit of history, and hopefully a lot of practical application. So basically the statement I want to sort of keep making over and over, and that hopefully will take away all of us from today, is that healthy things grow and growing things change. Healthy things grow and growing things change. I think there are a lot of stages of growth. I think there's a lot of paces of growth. To grow fast does not always equate to being better or best. Sometimes we thrive in our growth. Sometimes we're simply just living and making it, but we're still growing. We're still able to move forward, which indicates growth too. We all have different ranges and capacities for growth. And I think also growth has so much to do with outside factors, such as where we find ourselves, what environment are we in, what circumstances are we facing that will affect us for better or worse, right? Growth has to do a lot with our own health, our own body health, our emotional health, our spiritual health. And think about 2020, right? If we just look at last year and think about like what all the difficult circumstances that we as individuals and as a community, as a nation, as a world had to face. And yet we celebrate because we are still here. And all of us, we're still showing up to be a part of a community. We're still wanting to reach out and push into our connections. We're still wanting to learn and to listen, to speak up and to stand up. And for me, that alone shows much growth in the midst of difficult circumstances. So I think I want to ask us or challenge us today, not to measure how much we've grown, not to analyze that and think about how much you've stretched or changed your minds, but rather, are you and have we been static, or are we choosing to grow? And if not, if for any reason we realize that we have been static in some area of our life, what can we do? And what can we change? What do we need to change internally and or be a part of some kind of change externally to help us be able to grow into our capacities for this season? So one practical example of growth. I do not have a green thumb. Some of you already know that about me. My mom definitely knows that about me because she has a green thumb. When it is cold outside and it is freezing in winter, her cars have to come out of the garage because all of her damn plants have to fit in there. Like she's just got a gazillion. Abby's clapping. Abby is a plant mom. She's got them all around her. And some of you might be green thumbs too. I am not. I have tried because, as most of you know, I love all things beautiful and all things living. And so I have bought so many plants over the years, and even the easy plants, right? The orchids, I've killed the orchid. I had cactus that I killed. I mean, I can't. My most successful plants though are succulents. Thank God for this, very cool trend of succulents lately, because I have like 6 or 7 of them that have stayed alive inside. They're tiny, but they've stayed alive. But my shining achievement, y'all, is my poinsettia. Look at this poinsettia bush. So I got this gifted to me, and I wish I could remember who gave it to me, and I hate that I can't, but December 2019, I was gifted this glorious, bright red, blooming, flowering poinsettia. And I thought, well, that will be pretty for a while. And I loved it. It was gorgeous. I kept it. I put it on my kitchen table. I have watered that thing most weeks. Maybe not every week, but most weeks I have watered this. Randy, stop shaking your head. Also a green thumb in Randy. But y'all, she has stayed green. She has lost her, turned over her leaves. She never has rebloomed though. So it's been over a year, right? We've been through we're into 2021. She's never rebloomed. And I realize that she has to have the proper care, right? And the conditions and the environment in order to rebloom. And I have failed her with that. But there's something in her that with my little bit of watering has said, I'm gonna stay green and I'm gonna stay here. I may not be thriving, but I'm still growing. And so that to me, I was like, I could preach a sermon off of that alone, right? That sometimes we're not going to be in a space where we're able to bloom to our fullest capacity, but we are still turning over leaves and we are still showing up. And therefore that growth alone should also be celebrated. Okay, so she has growth in her, and I'm thankful that I'm able to keep something alive. But we also have growth in us, right? Some years we're growing by simply surviving, again, based on the elements and the years, and other times we are thriving because not only do all of our outside circumstances fall neatly into place, and we've surrounded ourselves with the right people, the right relationships, the right communities, the right work environment that encourage our growth. We also have resources some years at our disposal. We're reading, we're watching things that challenge us, we're being moved by art, we're getting out into nature. We're allowing these things again to expand and to challenge and to grow us. But also the third factor in that is equally our mindsets are open. Our mindsets are focused as well. And I think that is when we ultimately flourish, when there's healthy circumstances on the outside and a healthy approach and a willingness and an openness to learn and to grow on the inside. So healthy things grow and growing things change. Back in 2016, right in the thick of sort of the hardships of leading and pastoring at the church that many of us were a part of, I came across a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. Have any of you read Mindset, or are you familiar? No. Okay, great. I'm just going to give you a simple overview. I would still encourage you, if you ever have time, to read the book. But Carol Dweck did all of this research over multiple years, and a simplified version is she concludes that humanity has the capacity for two different mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So the fixed mindset assumes that any character we have, intelligence, any creative ability that we have are a static given, which we can't change in any meaningful way. And thus success for a fixed mindset is just the affirmation of that inherent intelligence that we already know we have. It's an assessment of how those givens measure up against equally other fixed standards. Striving for success with a fixed mindset and avoiding failure at all cost becomes a way of just maintaining the sense of being smart and skilled. So you're born with this thing, you have this thing, once you grow into it, like that's it, and you just have to continue just to affirm and prove that you are this one thing. But fixed mindset hates failure. Okay, so if my poinsettia had a fixed mindset, she would assume that she was only meant to flower once in her life and think nothing of then changing or hoping that her plant mom would actually treat her well and give her the best circumstances she could to challenge and to actually bloom again, right? It would be one and done, and she would just be living and focusing on that one achievement in the past in 2019. The growth mindset, however, the growth mindset thrives on challenges, and it sees failure not as evidence of unintelligence, but as a heartening springboard for growth and for stretching our abilities. Carol says, and this is the quote, "The view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. Believing that your qualities are carved in stone, the fixed mindset, it creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. If you only have a certain amount of intelligence or a certain amount of skill or a certain amount of talent, well, then you'd better prove that you at least have a healthy dose of it." She says, "I've seen so many people with this one consuming goal of proving themselves in the classroom, in careers, and relationships. And every situation calls in for a confirmation. Every situation is evaluated. But with growth mindset, the hand you are dealt is just the starting point for development." So people differ, right? We honor the differences and the diversity of people. And so people's skills, their talents, their aptitudes, their interests, their temperaments, like we are all different. But the growth mindset says everyone, though, can grow and can change through application and through experience. Carol believes then that a person's true potential then is unknown. That we can never meet somebody, experience somebody, and then be able to name their potential, period. That can never happen, that a person's true potential is unknown. And for me, that is amazing news. That is such good news because it affirms that what we have already felt and we've talked about here and encouraged is that we are unfinished, right? We are unfinished, that we recognize, yes, our magic and our worth and the magic and worth of the universe and the human family, but we also recognize that we have the opportunity to continually become. And thus then that this world has the opportunity to become what it is meant to be, what it has the capacity to be. What's happening now, what has happened in the past is not proven then that it will and has to happen in the future. We are able to change. And so the growth mindset then sets us up to have a passion for learning, a passion for growing, rather than having a hunger for approval and for validation. So see the differences? It's a passion for learning, a passion for growing, versus having this hunger and need for constant validation and approval. And not to get off on a tangent, and I could, and many of us could, and maybe this would be worthy of another gathering, but I think so many of my experiences of the church, and specifically white evangelical churches, and I know so many of your experiences of the churches have lined up with that, but I think that the church has held a fixed mindset. It has held this idea like what's already been revealed has been revealed. It's important to know what has been written down and came through the hand and voice in the Bible, and how we are supposed to live has already been decided. So it's not about expansion. It is not about change. It's not about mystery in so many ways. And it's definitely, the church definitely, again, my experience of it is about proving over and over and over and arguing, right? Arguing to prove. There is no openness. There is no willingness to talk and to listen. So off my tangent, we can come back to that if we want. Both mindsets, growth and fixed, represent two totally different worlds. In the fixed world, again, success is about proving and validating. In the growth world, though, success is about stretching and developing yourself. A fixed world is a setback. A failure is a setback. Failure proves you are not who you thought you were. But in the growth world, failure and effort is what makes you smart. The fact that you risked, the fact that you tried, and the fact that you failed just means there's something here that I can learn. There's a way that I can grow here. So in the growth mindset, personal success is when you work your hardest to become your best in this season. That is how you define success. Am I giving myself to this? Am I allowing myself to be challenged and to grow? In the fixed mindset, which is also interesting, you're constantly assigning blame. In the growth mindset, there is no judgment. You don't come at the world with a judgmental attitude. You have this huge appetite for learning, for constantly seeking out any kind of input that the author says that you can then metabolize into learning into growth and into constructive action. So I believe, this is me talking, like I believe in why we talk about inherent worth and magic. I also believe there's an inherent wisdom given to each of us. But that inherent wisdom then comes with the responsibility to gain knowledge, to gain perspective, to grow it, and constantly by our actions, by making mistakes, by owning those mistakes and apologizing from them, showing that we learn from them by making better actions. That innate wisdom then always then can allow us to remain curious and open. And so I think a telltale sign of us saying, am I growing or not growing? Like, is your curiosity in this moment stunted? Like, have you stopped being curious? Have you lost a sense of wonder? Be it in general, like in large ways or in small ways, maybe still about humanity or about that person or that issue that continues to frustrate you. Are you still willing to ask questions? If you're still willing, then you're still open to learning. If you've stopped questioning, if you've stopped allowing wonder to come in, then I think you're stopping the opportunity to grow, because healthy things grow and growing things change. One of my favorites, when I did this Mystic Justice podcast, it just made me think, like, who are the people that have moved me over the years that are the mystics? Like, who am I enamored with? And I went back to Hildegard of Bingen, who is the saint mystic that I was always drawn to, especially in my pastoring at the church days, because I was finding lots of the phrasing and the prayers that she wrote always had to do with nature. And we'll get into that in a second. But she was born in 1908. She grew up in an abbey and later became a nun and became the head mistress of this convent. But she wrote and said that she was given several visions from what she called God, about God and about the world and about the future. She was very prophetic, and she wrote those down in book forms, and she also wrote a musical and a play. But the things that I want to focus on today about Hildegard and why she resonates not just with me, but with what we're discussing, is that she believed in a divine connection between all living things, inclusive of, you know, her view of God, inclusive of humanity, and inclusive of the natural world. They were all connected. Second, she said that man's growth, or human's growth, if I'm being more inclusive than her phrasing, that comes out of a process of discovery, like learning something, and then action. So it's discovery and action for her. It was about learning and then applying and changing. So part of her history, she passed away in 1179, and the church began a process, like they recognized how much she was influencing the culture of the church in the day. And so the Catholic Church began the process of canonization and for recognizing her as a saint in 1228, but then it was like put to the side and ignored, and then brought up again in 2012, and she was finally made a saint then. So that's super fun facts. So today then, Saint Hildegard, she stands for holistic teaching. She stands for finding harmony between spirit, mind, and body. And she stands for the interconnectivity of all of humanity and all of nature and the cosmic presence of our universe represented in each individual. So hopefully you can see why I'm moved by her and why it makes sense to talk about her when we're talking about Imaginarium. So she believed God, her idea of God was what she called the greening force in the universe, greening force in the universe. It's part of why I wanted to be outside in next to all the green grass around me. This greening power of God, she said, was embodied in every living thing and thus needed to be cultivated as well. So she stood for and encouraged and believed that things were meant to grow, that the idea of growth was divine in and of itself. So much so that one of her visions of what she called the heavenly city, there's a Latin name for it as well. But in this vision, which she later painted and she wrote, and this was what put into her musical play that she wrote, she called this heavenly city, it's what she called the kingdom of God. And it's what, for our practical terms, I consider when we're envisioning a better world, a just world, a world where everyone has enough and no one needs to be afraid. That's how I envision what she's thinking about in the heavenly city. So in this actual vision, she says, the city is made up of living stones, and the walls, these living stones, these walls represent humanity. They represent two things: human self-criticism and human work. So the two walls furnish the shelter of this city that she dreamed. The first wall she called speculative knowledge. And what she means by speculative is not what we know in the modern sense of the phrase of basing something on conjecture. She means, like, the Latin word for speculum meant mirror. It meant speculative knowledge then is one of these walls of the city. It was mirror knowledge. It was being willing and choosing to reflect, to look at ourselves and to be critical then of our own actions or lack thereof. And so literally she paints into these walls. It's almost like a translucent silverish stream that would look like a mirror. So more of the symbolism of her built city is that they have these precious stones in it, but they're also infused with this flowering garden. So it's like gemstones and budding flowers. And so the Latin word gemma, which it's one of her key expressions that she writes a lot, gemma. And it means both a jewel and a bud, as in like a flower bud. So her city then exists in this phrase viriditas, which is another key Latin expression of hers, which means and evokes greenness. It literally holds both the beauty and sort of the fertility of the universe as a whole. So she's thinking of the greening power of God. She's thinking of the greenness that's representative of the world and this greenness that should be represented in humanity as well. It is a vision for her of justice, and that includes growth. It's a vision of a lived equality and a continual capacity for more. So she gave them a vision then for their present day and for the future of what she believed God had in store, right, for the world. So she saw humans as divine buds, if you will, Thus, the building of this great world was done and would be done then by the work of human hands and the fruits then of our efforts. At her city, in the heart of her city, in this vision, was a cosmic tree whose roots for her were the prophets, those that had come before and spoken of this just world. And then the branches and the fruits represented virtues. And those virtues were imagined as cosmic powers within each individual human soul. And so this tree also, not just the walls, not just the city, but the tree was human and divine, somehow whole and not yet complete. It never seemed to have the opportunity to continue to grow. So the symbolism of building for her is complemented always by growth, or partnered always with growth. And the tree in her vision, it covers the whole city or the whole earth, and it gives shade to those that are doing the work alongside each other. So also really lovely in her vision, and the what we take away from it is there are twigs and branches that she shows that can be cut off, things that are making mistakes, things that are falling off and maybe not living to their potential, but instead of those things being thrown away, she says that there is hope that those things can be replanted and thus be useful again. It's also fascinating to me that she's living in a time where she's got a ton of male contemporaries who are obviously the ones already being published, already being listened to, right? Already having tons of power. So all of those male contemporaries at the time are also talking about visions of God and of heavenly cities, and visions of the future, but they also, specifically Augustine, however you choose to pronounce him. So he's one of her contemporaries, and he's also writing at the same time she's getting these visions. He's getting these visions and writing, and he wrote his book, The City of God. Well, when he's talking about the city of God, he also has that there is another city that is in competition with the city of God, and that's the city of Babylon. It is this evil city then that is represented. Obviously, what we know, most of us then, this is a place that would represent hell, the afterlife, you know, for sinners, for people that somehow do not get saved. And so those cities are in conflict in Augustine's and in most of her male contemporaries. Well, for Hildegard, which I just love that, thank goodness the power of her words have been written down and carried on to us. She basically said, okay, if there is a Babylon or an evil city, it does not exist alongside this idea of an earthly, divine, heavenly city. She said, but more so, if you see signs of anything that looks like a Babylon, it's only pointing to a city that has not yet succeeded. It's pointing to a city where the growth is not finished yet. So Babylon, or evil then, for her symbolized simply part of this process of creating a better world, of the timing, giving room and grace and time for people, yes, to make mistakes and show up maybe at the lowest of ourselves or the worst of ourselves. But she says we don't discount them, we don't throw them away. That city's not competing for the final end of this story, if you will. It's simply a part of the process. I loved that. I loved that. So the world then, in her estimation, and I think in our estimation for so many of us, we are in process. She wasn't saying either, just to make sure I'm noting, she's not saying that places like Babylon or things evil, it's good that it exists. She's just saying it's simply a time for us to restart if we find ourselves surrounded by something like that, or in that part. But her heavenly city, it's imagined a space where justice is not only fulfilled, but where also there's space to include seasons of growth. She has sprouts in this heavenly city. She has flowering in this heavenly city. She has the bearing of fruit. She also shows the twigs that are broken off and get chance and opportunity to be replanted. Now there's a ton also other Christian imagery all throughout her writings and her paintings that I'm only choosing to focus on some of it for maybe obvious reasons. But the parts that I'm trying to illuminate and bring out are the invitational parts, the parts that to me are, she cast this vision for, again, not just the future, not some heaven to her in this heavenly city was not separate than what earth was. It was what earth could become. It is what humanity would become if we continued to work into the best of us. And so I love that. And so when I'm thinking about growth and the fact that her images of building constantly are breaking into blossoms of flower, like spring is continually happening for her in different stages of this vision and in different parts of this city. So there's this deep connection for her then between the city, between the gardening and the flowering, and to humanity. And so it's the same way that we speak here all the time of our deep connections that we have to each other, that we should have to ourselves, understanding our own capacity, each other's capacity. How can we call each other to be our best selves, not just in this moment, but in the future, and the type of world then that we want to create. But it's not going to be without our own effort, right? So I see this mystical vision then from Hildegard as one to inspire at least me and challenge me forward, and maybe you too. I see my sweet poinsettia plant that has lasted and maybe not thrived yet and maybe not rebloomed yet, but this idea that it is still here, and in some seasons and some years, us just making it is a testament to our own growth and the fact that we are still here and doing our very best in the season, and that is okay too. And I see this weather outside, right? The fact that we are in the midst of spring, and as Sarah mentioned, not just the sun, but also realizing the value of the rain that is needed, and that we're in this rhythm right now in this season. And it is invitation. It's an invitation to us to celebrate and to choose to commit to our own growth and the growth of the world. So healthy things grow and growing things change. And so the question remains, and my challenge to us, again, is not to evaluate and decide that we need to prove, oh, I've grown this much this year. Oh, I've grown this much this month. It's not about that. It is not about the proof. The question is, and the challenge is, are we choosing to commit to growing? Are we choosing to commit to showing up, to risking some, to providing effort, to knowing that we will fail, we will make mistakes, and yet we can learn from those things? And can we trust to them? Trust, and this is why we do a practice like Tell Me Something Good, not because we're negating that there are horrible, negative things. We just named at the beginning of our time together, 4 people in Nashville alone died last night because of this flood. And we name that. We take a moment to just think about the lives lost and the power, how that affects their families and their friends, and ultimately how it affects us. Their energies in this world and missing in this world now should affect us, right? So we do not negate the bad, but we focus on trusting that this world can be better, that there can be better ways that we can relate to each other, that there's better ways that we can live into our own magic and worth. There's better ways that we can help create less hierarchy in this world, better ways that we can create new systems and structures that are not weighed down with, patriarchy and white supremacy and like so many things that need to be undone. Yes, the work is there that needs to be done, but we also have to trust that there is a better way. And that's really at the heart of why we do everything we do. But that's what I wanted to say for today and challenge us with. And I hope that moves you and at least sparks something in you. I'm wondering if you're thinking about like, hey, have I had that fixed mindset, or do I recognize? Because surely every one of us has or will continue to go through seasons where we feel like it's a fixed mindset season. We're going to go through it. I think even in the end of her book, she's like, it will never be that we're always going to be in the growth mindset, but it should be something we aspire to choose to learn. So tell me what you're thinking. Tell me how that hits you. Sorry for talking so fast. I just had a lot I wanted to get out. Yeah, Alana.
Yes, I wanted to touch on what you said about the growth part, because whenever like I feel like I'm succeeding in something or I'm getting close, it's like there's that little gremlin that kind of creeps in, and it's sort of like, oh, you're not good enough to be that caliber. You're not good enough to do this. And so I guess my question would be like, how do you balance that? How do you get rid of that gremlin? Like for example, like writing a song or something, and it's really tugging at your heart. Should I record it? Should I not record it? So like, how do you kind of work to get little gremlin, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. So you're saying how, when you have a challenge in front of you, right? How do you push through like, hey, it's going to take some hard work to actually accomplish this thing that I want to accomplish. In the meantime, feeling like when you haven't accomplished it yet, that you have a negative then view of yourself, right? In the process.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something all of us either have dealt with or probably continue to deal with. And it's part of the process of learning. I think for me, it's going back to trusting that, hey, if this thing is in me that I want to accomplish, then I need to commit that I'm going to have to work probably my ass off to get it done, right? So it's not just I'm going to show up once or I'm going to show up twice and then all of a sudden, hey, here we are, I'm performing the big song, or I'm finally right. I mean, I'm committed to writing this book. I have a book in me, maybe I have multiple, but I'm committed to writing it. Guess what? It takes a ton of work to write a book. And I have not, as much as I say I want to write it, as much as I've begun in fits and starts to write it, I have not yet committed to the full work, which is like literally every day you set aside, an hour or whatever it is to work on it. And after the end of a long season, then that thing will finally come to fruition. So part of it is understanding maybe that the hard things that you want to accomplish take a lot of hard work and effort. But in the meantime, I think whatever internally is saying to us, like you should already be that thing, is the negative voice. Again, that's not invitational. That's not an invitational voice. The invitational voice, whether it's our own, heart and intuition speaking back to us, or what you like to think of the divine or God, I think that voice that we should listen to is always going to be the voice calling you forward. It's always going to be the voice like calling you back to the work. It's never the one, if there's anything that's ever putting you down. And we said this over and over when a few of us got to visit and speak to and uplift prisoners. Like if there's any voice that's telling you you're less than, then that is not the voice ever to listen to. It's never the voice to listen to. So you can always know you should silence that voice. Anyone else want to also respond to Alana with any thoughts and encouragement? Yeah, Malia.
I was trying to remember where I read this, but I was reading something this morning. The author was talking about how he loves failure. And because failure teaches. So when I think in going to your question where you feel like you're thinking like, sometimes when you get those, I'm not good enough, it's a kind of sometimes based in what if I fail? What if it, or what if, what I put out is not good enough? And it was helpful for me to read that, because that's something that that is often a stumbling block for me, especially when I'm trying to move forward as a baker, not wanting to try something because it's going to fail. The failure teaches you. And so then, you try again and you just get better and better. So I thought I would throw that out.
I also think, and Malia, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this in the midst of your wanting to go after being this new role and job and the thing that being a baker and all of this. And in the meantime, you're working towards it. You're not in the role maybe you ultimately want to be in yet, but you're in this beginning roles, like as even Ashley said earlier, like you got to start here to move up to the bigger thing, which I don't know if you were saying that snarky because of the frustration with your job before or not. But you do. So my question is, sometimes we imagine the thriving will come when we finally reach that thing we've attained to. But I found sometimes I've realized when I'm actually just doing the work in the process, it feels like that kind of feeling evokes a thriving long before I've even gotten to the finish line too. So sometimes we have to maybe question our definitions of thriving, right? And is the thriving only going to come at the end, or can the thriving come like in the middle, in the means too as well? Okay, what else, y'all? What you thinking? You're all growing in healthy ways. I love it. Yeah, Nathan, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, I really connected with the idea of the just sort of like continuing to grow, but not necessarily, moving forward, especially in this last year. Like I've said to a few people, right, that this has just really felt like this liminal space where not a lot of growth or new life, right, is coming into. It's really just about maintaining the current life, the continuing to live, in kind of a philosophical, but also sort of a literal sense in many ways. As we've taken, extreme measures, right, to protect ourselves from this situation. But this year, kind of the beginning when we did our vision boards and things like that, my word was kind of unstuck. So I wanted to basically get to a place where I was acknowledging, right, that the last year had been this situation where I didn't have the opportunity to kind of like move forward, but now that the opportunity exists, and I really want to embrace that. And I still have some, fear and things like that associated with it. And as we transition from a locked down world to a vaccinated world, and not a clear understanding of how that transition will look, but at the same time, really wanting to kind of push into that more and kind of embrace this idea of being unstuck.
Love it. I love it. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? Yeah, Linda.
I think when I was really in Christianity firmly, that it was very, very much, it wasn't a place of death, but it was just kind of a place of survival. There wasn't a lot of growth because there were very specific rules, and there was kind of a sense of, oh, I have arrived, and if I do it right, everything's going to be fine. So life got very, very small in a lot of ways. At least the spiritual life got very, very small. But then breaking those walls down, taking those risks and letting those walls fall away, and or working at breaking them down, the transition was really scary because that I think we think that there is some kind of a finish line, that there is some kind of place that we can attain, and where we'll be happy, or we'll be pleasing, or we'll be satisfied ourselves, or others will be satisfied with us. Whatever it is, that there's this idea that there is some kind of end goal that we will attain, and then everything will be okay. And as everything has fallen away and then changed and become something else, like you were saying with growth, it's just things continually change, and sometimes a leaf falls off and it dies, but then there's a new one, or maybe that whole branch dies, but then there's a new one, or maybe all of the energy goes into this area, and this thing that you thought you were growing in just kind of goes dormant for a while or falls away or whatever. But it is a continual growth, and I think philosophically and theologically that leaves God, whatever you think God is, or the divine, just a freedom to move wherever, instead of move wherever through you, and move wherever around you, and leaves an openness there that is very frightening if we want to be in that container, but at the same time is very freeing. And that is where growth happens, and I don't think that growth ever stops.
Yeah, I love that. That's why I think I was so moved by, I'd read about Hildegard before. Again, I'd read some of her prayers and her visions, but I never quite captured this idea that she cast for, when we think about heavenly city, and heaven, in my estimation, was always the end, right? It was the finish line. But so whatever representation she felt like God gave her for what we're going towards, it was already whole, and yet there was still so much freedom and so much room for growth. Like, it was not a static situation. And so I'm deeply moved by that, even though there's again a lot of Christian imagery wrapped up in her other writings, and some of this even that I'm like, I don't need that, but that's deeply moving. And I agree with you, Linda. I think to think like there is no destination, like this process is just the means is the end, right? It's just as important of wherever it is we're going to end up, but like we can be whole and still becoming. We can glory and celebrate this beauty of inherent worth and magic in our being, which so many of us never were encouraged to do to begin with. And then we can also challenge ourselves that we can become more too. And it's both and. I love it. I thought y'all be proud of me that I brought in a Christian mystic today.
I was going to say too, speaking to Alana's question, simply celebrating small victories, just being kind to yourself and reveling in any small victory that you have in regards to this will, again, it's like speaking to yourself, but I think it can help in changing your mindset about, I'm a failure, I haven't done this thing, I haven't done this thing well enough. I've got some things in my life right now that I'm weighed down by, but taking reveling in small victories is helping me. So thanks.
Love that.
Wait before that. And just any practical advice on your plant parenting. If you put a reminder on your phone, like just once a week to water your plant, then it's done. I actually had to start marking a calendar because I've gotten so forgetful. It's like, oh gosh, when did I do that last? I don't know. Or during the pandemic, the week seemed like, wait, it's Tuesday again already? I watered the plants a week ago. So I started marking a little like leaf on my calendar when I do it so that I can see when I did it last and see how dry they are. But yes, put a reminder on your phone and your poinsettia will live much longer.
I feel like she also needs to maybe be repotted and needs.
Yeah, she might be getting kind of big.
Happy.
Thank you for that. I just put it in my phone. Sarah, you're raising your hand. Also really glad to see you, Sarah. Glad you're here. Hold on, let me unmute you. Oh, you're good.
Hey. So I was thinking about this plant metaphor and how much I love it. Because we often forget about the seasons of growth. We forget that growth is not just one thing. That winter has to happen. Things have to stop. They have to be allowed to die, to go fallow, to return to the earth. Spring has to happen. Seeds have to be allowed to break. Things have to be allowed to hurt, to be difficult. When a seed, when you garden, when you first plant that seed, it's a moment of hope, right? You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if that seed's ever going to grow, if that seed's ever going to pop out of the ground. And I think growth is that we forget about that part of growth, that we forget that just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because there's not a flower or a fruit doesn't mean it's not happening. It's only when we give up that it stops happening. But even then, isn't winter a lot of just kind of giving up? Everything's just going to stop. We allow it to all die and return to the earth. So there's even a season for that. There's even a season for stopping and just saying, whoa, I'm too tired. This is too hard. I need to breathe. And that's okay. So when I think about growth, I always have to bring it back to the seasons and to what that really looks like. So, which for anyone who knows what's going on in my family knows that's an important lesson for us. I think it's an important lesson for all of us.
Indeed. Thank you for that. And again, we're really glad you're here. Anybody else? Abby, Randy, my plant people, any words of wisdom? Parting words, advice on growth in general, maybe not specifically for plants or for plants. Right.
On your poinsettia or?
You can text me more help with the poinsettia. How about that?
Well, I will say this in the lines of growth in a plant. 3 years ago, I think, when did we leave Grace Point? I can't even remember now. It's been so long.
Yeah, 3.5, almost 4.
Okay, so it was 3 years ago, I guess. We had the hydrangeas there. We decorated with them. Nobody wanted them. I took them, great. Put them outside here. And they had the blooms that first year, great, because that's, you know, they were already bloomed. And then the next year rolls around and they just kind of grew a little bit, but no blooms. And then last year they came back up, but I had all this wood there and nothing happened to that, but all the new growth came up and I had maybe 1 or 2 blooms. And then this year, all of the wood is still there. And now all of these buds are coming out on this wood and these new leaves, which means I'm going to get all kinds of flowers this year. So to say all that is, you know, sometimes I had to read and I had to learn and I had to understand what kind of hydrangea I had, how to take care of it, how to nurture it, everything. And that wasn't an overnight process. That's been a 3 to 4 year process of learning how to grow and to nurture it and to treat it the way it needs to be treated so that it can bring forth its best self. And I think that's how we are as humans in this life. We have to study and learn and grow, as you've said. And another thing, when you were talking about the tree and sheltering everybody, I thought about that movie Avatar. Has anybody seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm probably the only one that took something spiritual out of that movie. But it was so true how that big tree, that everything around was connected to it and attached to it and brought life from it. And I looked at that as earth. I mean, that's what we're all a part. Just an encouragement of using the plant metaphor is, so again, like Chris said, celebrate those little small things. I mean, the plant didn't die, but every year it came back with a little bit more growth and a little bit more growth. And when it finally got to that point, it just blew. It's starting to bloom and come out. So give yourself time to grow in patience.
Love it. So many good nuggets you just said. And I want to reiterate, I said like one sentence about it at the very beginning, but it's worth revisiting because you just mentioned it. Like this idea that we need to measure our growth by some standard or compare ourselves to anyone else, like that, this growth, like that, it took 4 years. It's a slow season of growth for that plant maybe to reach at least what its capacity is going to be this year. And who knows what the future will hold. But had you compared it to other hydrangeas, whatever you're talking about, you know, you could have been frustrated. And that's back to that like fixed mindset. We need to compare, we need to constantly be like proving ourselves, and it's a competitive world, right? A scarcity mentality. Like, no, that's the opposite of what the growth mindset and this whole beautiful idea of growth is. The point is that we're willing to do it, that we're investing in ourselves or our plants for the world. I love it. Well, this has been lovely, y'all. Oh yeah, who was about to say something?
I was going to say, I'll add to this. I mean, before I came out to myself, September 2014, I spent a lot of time in church, you know, serving this ministry, doing this, that, and the other. And I often wondered when I was going to save, in quotes, someone, because it never seemed to be that. I did a lot of background work, but still, it was nothing. It wasn't until I started being and taking care of myself that, if I can use this older term, God's Spirit can work through me for the sake of others. And it wasn't until I took care of my own vessel, or whatever big word we want to use here, that I was able to touch others one way, two way, whatever that would look like. But before then, it was all trying to make the equation be just right. If we just did this, here's the results that would happen. And none of it was true, none of it. And so if I just did something that was supposed to be wrong, that's actually where all the results came from, which still blows my mind in a lot of ways, how I believed that stuff for so long. But a state of being our best is really where it flows from. Can't be anybody else. We can only be ourselves.
Love it. I love it. Thank you, Monica. All right, y'all. It's 5:19. Thanks for spending an hour and 20 minutes with us. I am, again, so grateful.
Can I ask one question?
Oh, yes.
Where's Ben Green? I miss him.
Ben is down with his parents watching the FSU basketball game. He's very sad that you can no longer be watching a basketball game.
Let's not talk about it.
no, yeah. He had to go buy a sub pump or look for one because there's stuff in our, not basement, whatever. Crawl space. That's not working. Anyways. Okay. Our community email will come out tomorrow as soon as I get it to Malia, who will format it for you and get it out to you tomorrow morning. We will gather again, not next weekend. We hope you, if you're celebrating Easter, enjoy Easter weekend with your family. And if not, just have a glorious weekend. We'll be back the following weekend to gather. Hopefully it will not be long stretch like it had to be this month. And yeah, we have happy hour every Wednesday night. I can't always be there. I know that Malia and the Hausers and the Johns are rocking it every week and having so much fun. And Leah, every week they're rocking it. Sam Schwegler's on there. So if you need a simple time to touch base and laugh and or cry and be frustrated, that space is always available to you. Okay, so it's every Wednesday starting at 5 at the same link where you went to get this. Otherwise, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay, grab a toast if you have a drink. If not, we still toast to you without a drink. I'm going to share John O'Donohue. This is my favorite Irish poet. It's from his book, what's it called? Blessings to be. I forget the name of the title. Anyways, the title of the poem is For a New Beginning. He says, in out of the way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has quietly been forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered. It heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent. You wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you'll be home in a new rhythm where your soul senses that a new world awaits you. Cheers to a new you and a new me and a better world. Love you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see y'all.
See you too.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.